Sniper Elite has become a series synonymous with semi-realistic, tactical gameplay, punctuated with the occasional slow-motion money shot while you perform a vasectomy from a few hundred meters away. It definitely falls into a category of games I like to call gameplay first. The story, if there is one, is usually thimble deep, and as subtle as me trying to hit this fucking fuel tank. It's an unspoken rule that these gameplay first titles have to exclusively take themselves too seriously or not seriously at all. I gotta say, if we were to judge this book by its cover, with a name like Sniper Elite, I can't tell if it would be a leather-bound recollection of World War II's desperate twilight hours, or the gross magazine they keep behind the gas station counter. Developed by Oxford-based Rebellion Developments in 2005, also known for the Alien vs. Predator series, Sniper Elite received pretty decent reviews across Xbox, PS2, and PC, with most players citing the realistic combat and general ambiance and atmosphere of the world as the high points. Others mention the buggy missions and samey-looking level design as being key detractors from the experience. And on this channel, we're all about the experience, and if you want to have the best experience playing this dinosaur of a third-person action game, listen up. I bought this game on Steam, and outside of the tutorial, the game doesn't really hold your hand. There's a lot of trial and error. I consider this, and you'll hear this a lot during this video, to be a quirk of an older game, and something I consider to be part of the charm and experience when playing an older title. But I was wrong. The developers do explain how to play, in much greater depth than many modern games ever could, and they do this with the manual. For those folks in the audience who don't remember the days when game manuals were an art form, and not just a pre-order bonus, these are the small booklets that came with your game. Many often just contain the controls or advertisements, but the good ones? Oh buddy, the good ones are full of lore and art, where the reason your legs fell asleep on the toilet before Instagram thirst traps ever existed. The Sniper Elite manual is no slouch. It's fashioned to look like a military training handbook, and for good reason. You want to play this game, I consider it required reading. One of the things I complained about when taking notes was the absence of a lean function, since I couldn't see it in the controls. Lo and behold, it's right here on page 5. Could I get it to work? No, but that's not the point. My original notes also call out the complete lack of story. Well, okay, they don't call it out. I had my suspicions since the later entries are absolutely gameplay first endeavors, but it's all right here in the manual. You get more of an introduction to the mood and desperation of Berlin in 1945, and your context for even existing here is spelled out by Martin Pegler, an advisor on Sniper Elite and chief weapons curator of Leeds Armories, UK. The more I learn about game development and narrative design, the more impressed I am by the ability for a writer to multitask with their work. Pegler gives us a fantastic introduction to the role of a sniper in warfare and goes over some of the do's and don'ts of the craft. We're getting both a real-life primer on the fucking best practices of sniping and being coached on how to play the game better. It's small details like this that I just love. The manual goes on to bring up controls and settings, treating us to a fantastic color display of screenshots and extremely detailed descriptions of all elements of the UI, weapon diagrams, and, in my opinion, the most useful section of the manual, the field notes. Trust me, if you're playing Sniper Elite, turn off the annoying tutorial reminders after the first 5 minutes or so and just read this section. Disabling vehicles and distracting enemies in particular will be of interest. These are topics here that are never even touched on by the game. Returning to the game settings, you're going to want to pay attention to these categories: redefine controls, game settings, and video. Also, if you need to have different profiles for cheats or something, I need to point out that your game settings for some reason are tied to your profile and not global settings for the game. What a weird choice that was. But there are a few settings that I think are non-negotiable. Under redefine controls, take care to move keys closer to the left side of the keyboard. These are my settings if you want to copy them, but there's definitely room for improvement here. Under game settings, turn off the tutorial mode and just play the actual tutorial once or twice. The little notification pop-ups are pretty invasive and mess up the flow of the game, and anywhere you'd usually wish you had a tutorial, you can just make sure to keep interaction hints on and set it to novice or intermediate. Video is where the real important settings are. Resolution and desired aspect ratio are up to you. Personally, I did 1080p and 16:9, but some people have very strong feelings about 4:3, so to each his own. For texture detail, switch it to high. Don't even think about touching anti-aliasing. From what I can gather, because the game doesn't have VSync, once you turn on anti-aliasing, it starts up with some real fucky rendering on all 40 million frames your PC is computing because it's a game from 2005. See, somebody heard I didn't like 4:3 and the police are on their way. And in case you thought you'd be smart like me and enable VSync via your graphics card control panel, it doesn't work. But for video, everything else is up to you. The only asterisk I want to give you here is that the game does crash. As I said, it's not enough to hunt for a fix, but every 3 to 4 hours it will shit the bed. And this is coming from about 22 hours of beating the game and gathering footage. Cheats, like a game manual, can feel like a long-lost art form, and they're one of the best parts about returning to an older title. If you want to cheat in Sniper Elite, there are 4 options. They all involve creating a profile with a specific name. As I mentioned earlier, your game controls are tied to your profile for some strange reason, so unless you feel like changing your video and control settings for every cheat profile, just create one and change the name of that. The 4 cheat flavors are as follows. Panzer turns all your bullets into rockets. Rat Bomb makes all the rats explode like a grenade when you shoot them. Stealth silences all your rifle shots. Note, this is just your rifle shots, and your secondaries will still make noise. Finally, Reb 00 is the only one I would actually suggest turning on from the get-go. It enables a cheat option in the menu that allows you to turn on God mode, infinite ammo, infinite projectiles, silent mode, and invisible mode. But to be honest, the only reason I think you should enable it is so you can actually use the quick save option and unstick yourself if you get all janked up on the geometry. Usually if you want a quick save, despite what the instruction manual says, you can't actually load the quick save until you die. Before I found out about this menu, I used to run around firing my secondary, desperate to get murdered so that I can go back to the save I just made. Sure, I could make a hard save, but that takes me out of the game for just a few seconds longer than I'd like. The premise of Sniper Elite is one that blends history and fiction together to give us some alternate history entirely believable in the scope of World War II and the events immediately following it. Set during the end of World War II, you play as Carl Fairburn, an OSS agent deployed behind enemy lines in Berlin.
My father was a US diplomat stationed in Berlin. I spent most of my youth there. I'd spent 4 years training at West Point before America joined the war. Now I was back in Berlin, recruited by the OSS because of my knowledge of the city and the language.
With the Nazis mainly on the defensive, your ultimate goal is to gather intel on and disrupt the Soviet Union's nuclear weapons program. During the waning hours of World War II, it became clear to all of the Allied powers that peace with the Soviet Union could not and would not last, with Winston Churchill describing the new divide between East and West as an iron curtain descending upon the continent. While the Germans never successfully created a nuclear bomb, their rocket technology was some of the best in the world, thanks in no small part to their scientists. This sparked a mad race to claim as many Nazi scientists as possible before the Soviets. In a famous US intelligence initiative called Operation Paperclip, over 1,600 Nazi scientists were quietly retrieved from Germany and secreted away in the US to aid in their nuclear program, and eventually the space race. In fact, the man many people consider to be the father of space travel, Wernher von Braun, was controversially a member of the SS. Anyway, getting back to the game, most of the missions revolve around this disruption of the Soviet Union's efforts to acquire both these scientists and the German infrastructure used in the design of nuclear weapons. The story is minimal, with a small cast of players, mainly centered around groups like the NKVD and the German Resistance, although you do pull the plug on Martin Bormann, Hitler's private secretary. And that's it. I can count on one hand the number of named characters, but Sniper Elite is what I call story light. That is, all the taste and flavor of the story, but without all the calories. Sniper Elite is all about the gameplay and ambiance, so if you want to enjoy this game, you'll want a good pair of headphones and no distractions. This is a setting that will suck you in if you let it, thanks in no small part to the audio. OBS was giving me a lot of troubles trying to record this footage, so I found myself in the main menu a lot testing my recording settings, which means I heard the main musical track a lot, and it fucks. I think it's clear that the devs value the ambiance and wanted you to be able to use verbal cues from enemies like whispering and footsteps to encourage a more immersive experience, but this is at the cost of there just not being a whole lot of music. There are some decent background tracks that can help set the tone of each level, but these are just loops. They have very defined start and ending moments. Besides the inconsistencies in music, there are also some fairly hilarious sound effects that I am making the conscious effort to consider part of the charm. These schlocky pew-pews of the silenced pistol, and these horrendous punching effects. They just put a big dumb smile on my face. I find it hard to tell how serious the game takes itself sometimes because of the cartoony sound effects, whereas the voice actors are taking it super seriously.
Let's go. Please, no. My brother. They're holding him at the camp. We have to save him.
Sorry, my orders are to get Dr. Lohmann out of Berlin. He's more important than your brother.
Every line from Carl sounds like he's hoping the secret police are going to cut themselves on the sharp edges of his one-liners.
You're crazy.
Maybe, but right now we don't have any other options. Nice. Very nice.
What about the AA guns?
On my list.
The problem is that he's just so soft-spoken. This is Mr. Sniper Elite himself, but the only time I'd find him even slightly intimidating is if I heard that voice telling me not to come to school tomorrow. I suspected that this guy was just one of the developers hauled out of his chair for the role, since it almost sounds like he's hiding a British accent, but this is a professional voice actor. He's worked on everything from The Witcher to, oh my sweet merciful Christ. Where's the episode where Thomas and friends have to plug some fascists while committing acts of sabotage in war-torn Berlin? Wait, maybe...
What's your name?
Thomas.
One of the first things that struck me about Sniper Elite gameplay-wise was how awkward the controls are. Not the actual key bindings, although those are definitely a sign of its age, but like the weird acceleration when turning, and the fact that our boy Carl is wearing roller skates, he's sliding around all over the goddamn place. Watch this. I let go of the key here, and he just keeps going. There is a key to change your speed which can influence this, but that's mainly to help with sneaking. Maybe the OSS already has V2 tech and it's just strapped to Carl's legs. He definitely looks like a guy that would have a rocket in his pants. Maybe that's why both of his legs dislocate from his pelvis whenever he goes prone. Oh, speaking of sneaking, it's impossible. Okay, it's not actually impossible. You could probably go super slow and never get caught, but the Soviet secret police have Vulcan hearing and X-ray vision because they will always find you or hear you or see you. There's a little meter at the bottom left-hand corner that shows how concealed you are at any one point, but I don't trust it at all. The enemy AI is crazy overtuned, and oftentimes if you find yourself getting caught no matter what you try, it's because they're scripted to find you, and it's always at the most inopportune times. Don't feel bad if you feel like you need to break up with Sniper Elite after only a few dates. I promise it's not you, it's the Soviets. Anyway, when the mission starts out, you're dumped off with all your essential tools in a big pile. I guess they didn't want you to just spawn with everything because it removes some of your agency as a player, but why toss them in a pile? Give me weapon grades or something. On the subject of weapons, something people are no doubt going to criticize me for is the fact that I'm complaining that you don't function much as a traditional sniper while also carrying around a giant machine gun and rocket launcher on my back. People with the same neurotic need to point out elements of historical inaccuracies like myself might see this and remind me that each of these weapons would have had a dedicated man and a squad to use, but that all this gear is so heavy there's no way Carl could carry it all. And to this I would like to point out that I have a sniper rifle, mines, TNT, time bombs, MG42, and a Panzerschreck, and you don't. I mean, it's a Panzerschreck for fuck's sake. It Shreks Panzers. When it comes to actual gunplay, I found it was easiest to keep your secondary weapon up at all times, since you exclusively use left mouse button to fire these, and right mouse button brings up your scope regardless of if your sniper rifle is equipped. So you can basically have the best of both worlds without switching between the two weapons. Speaking of sniping, this is where Sniper Elite shines. Shocker, I know. But for the time, it was so groundbreaking to have to factor in wind, aiming above your target if they're far away, just all the little stuff like that. As you progress through the game, you get access to different sniper rifles that mainly just have different zoom levels and scope designs.
Got a little something for you. With all the latest rifling methods and experimental optics from Zeiss.
If you're somebody that prefers to play a game on specifically higher or lower difficulties, the enemy AI is completely fucked, so I don't think there's much you can change there to impact your difficulty, but you can definitely make the game harder or easier in the little menu here before every mission. You can pick and choose what you want your sniping experience to be like. As I mentioned, you have a number of tools at your disposal, health packs and bandages to heal yourself, a bunch of different explosives like TNT, time bombs, and tripwire grenades. Perhaps intentionally, the controls to interact with your inventory and actually use any of these is a little finicky. It's not as simple as just hitting a key and dropping it. You have to open your inventory, cycle through to what you want, select it. Often there's more instructions after selecting it, like with the time bombs, then placing the item, then closing your inventory. Because of this, I only used these tools when I was absolutely sure I had time to kill and wasn't going to be harassed in placing something. For example, I had the best of intentions when it came to properly using time bombs, but because I had such a little confidence in my ability to tell time properly in this game, I more than often just dropped it, waited, and ended up just shooting it to blow it up. For the first couple levels, I tried being really good and playing the game it was intended, but usually this would result in me playing the careful way, dying a bunch, losing patience, and convincing myself using heavy explosives was sniper elite-ish enough, as long as I throw the word surgical in front of the whole situation. Another small detail that bugged me was just completely inconsistent communication about what you can hide under and what you can't. There are some tanks and cars you can crawl under to hide, but most of them you can't. The developers sprinkled these throughout the levels like candy in a candy store. Why the fuck would I write that? Anyway, it's just frustrating. Give me more places to hide instead of making me prone slide everywhere. I can see Carl would fit. This man's like a $145, and I'm sure he can suck in the gut long enough to slide under this tank. In case you haven't picked up on this by now, Sniper Elite is wildly inconsistent in its level design. Let the opening level in the Karlshorst suburbs serve as the baseline. This is Sniper Elite's comfort zone. It doesn't really stray too far outside this. I don't think this is due to any lack of ambition on the part of Rebellion. It's very clear they're stretching their assets as far as they can realistically go, but genuinely unique levels are a bit of a rarity. Usually level flipping is done as a way to add length to a game, and in Sniper Elite it feels like the bland, urban level design is just used to let the game breathe between the larger set piece moments. The stagnation isn't always so in your face thanks to some creative mission types, but even then I don't know if they're really all that creative. Just slightly different from the bland run here, do this, then run back to where you started halfway across the map missions. A few I can definitely say were standouts are Brandenburg Gate, Karlshorst Reprise, and the opening to the Recover V2 Tech chapter. In Brandenburg Gate, this is the chapter where we finally knock down that pesky wall and create an open concept living space in Martin Bormann's cranium. The game has you sneak around guards and plant some TNT in the middle of the road around all these guys who don't notice it for some reason, for you to snipe to take out Bormann's entourage. While all the missions involve some sort of sabotage, this feels like the sort of thing a commando like Carl Fairburn would realistically do. The game even sees fit to have us take cover under this truck. Can you take cover under any other trucks in the game? What the fuck do you think? Keeping with the theme of sabotage and subterfuge making my nipples hard, Karlshorst Reprise is a standout not only for the level design, but for the sheer variety of tasks. Okay, the level design isn't all fantastic here. I couldn't tell you why there are piles of barrels in the middle of this field, but the game does hide some enemy soldiers that aren't as elite as you, so they're not too hard to kill. In this level, we get to infiltrate a restricted area, hide bodies, plant time bombs, and intercept a high-ranking officer for some documents before killing him. Believe it or not, and this is a little behind-the-scenes tip, it's not actually the gunshots that kill him, it's the GoldenEye 64 sound effects. Okay, so the Recover V2 Tech mission is found in one of those urban environments I was literally just bitching about seeing ad nauseum in the game, but they do something pretty cool here. There's an NKVD guard post you're going to assault later on, but for the time being, they're sending out motorcycle couriers, all of whom we need to intercept. With explosives. It was just refreshing to have the game let me proceed how I want. I know who's going to be where and at what time, so I can take them out however I wish. Of course, I almost always use tripwire grenades, aside from this one target where I fucked up my placement of TNT but got a sweet moving target kill. Since I started making these videos, I've been constantly surprised how my expectations of a game change the more time I spend with a title. I mean, I'm not going to learn. And I've said this literally every script I've written so far, and I'm going to continue to say it, but we can't all be perfect. This particular thinking bit me in the ass when I first failed a mission and was greeted with the cutscene.
Третье охранное подразделение конвою Бормана отставить! Отставить! В районе противник! Повторяю, в районе противник!
I found it refreshing that a game allowed you to fail and had a contingency plan for when you did. They had some form of content lined up to show you why your actions influenced your failure. With Martin Bormann, for example, if you kill too many people in the Brandenburg Gate level, they call him and let him know how dicey the situation is and that he probably shouldn't make an appearance. Same with the Karlshorst Reprise mission. If you leave a bunch of dead bodies lying around, the high-ranking officer probably isn't going to want to stick around to find out what handsome son of a gun decided the bunker walls would really pop with a splash of brain matter. But I take it back. As soon as I fail, I want the game to slap me across the face and call me Stalin. The fact that I can fail and not find out for like 10 to 30 minutes is so goddamn annoying. It gets even more frustrating when you discover that while this feature, if you want to call it that, is baked in, what isn't is the abhorrently inconsistent scripting of enemies and objective updates. It's something you take note of every now and again, but in the missions where you have to hold out against enemy forces, you're going to be wondering if Sniper Elite crashed, you did something wrong, there's a fucking enemy just running into a wall somewhere. In a game called Sniper Elite, if I have to run around the map blind firing my PPSH to bring all the boys to the yard, there's something wrong. The inconsistency of enemy waves and messaging on the part of the game is astonishing. If I just finished giving my hollow points a tour of Bolshevik's brain cavity and I have to sit there for 5 minutes waiting to find out if I did something wrong or if I'm going to see another wave of enemies, I'm going to develop a fucking complex. Alright, I won't lie to you, this game does not hold up under modern scrutiny. That's not to say any of its impact needs to be diminished. I mean, in 2005, Sniper Elite would have been on the shelf alongside games like Call of Duty, Brothers in Arms, and Battlefield. These are games that, while not specifically meant to ignore stealth, they're very loud. Sniper Elite is loud too, but it's like when you tell someone to whisper and they keep the same volume, but they just do this sort of voice. The intention was different, even if the end result turns into the same thing. It might be cheating, and I might be looking upon this game far more favorably because I've played later games in the series, but the trajectory set forth by the first entry in the Sniper Elite franchise doesn't change much in my mind. The game mechanics are certainly iterated upon, their presentation would eventually be more polished, and the AI had their Pervitin-laced chocolate bars pried out of their hands, but the core gameplay elements are present and accounted for. Games like Sniper Elite and Hitman do this thing to my brain where, as I'm playing, I'm pretty lukewarm on them, but then when I'm sitting at work or buying groceries or something mundane, I'll think, shit man, I could really go for some Sniper Elite right now. And I think for an old PC game like this, that's just enough. If you enjoyed this video, like, comment, and subscribe, or I'll find you. And if there's a game you'd like to see me cover, go ahead and leave that in the comments. This has been an escape from my analog nightmare. Good luck in yours.